Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Prosecutors released new documents Monday detailing an interview former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had with FBI investigators. The release came just hours before Flynn is scheduled to be sentenced in federal court. He pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russia. Special counsel Robert Mueller recommended he receive no prison time, citing his assistance to the Russia investigation. Earlier Monday, two of Michael Flynn's former business associates were charged with illegally lobbying for Turkey. The Justice Department says the two men were indicted as part of a federal investigation into an illegal lobbying effort. Turkey had been trying to pressure the United States into expelling one of Turkish President Erdogan's enemies. I spoke with attorney Jesse Weber about all of this earlier. Do we have a sense of what this document actually shows?
I'm concerned that we're making more of it based upon the filing. It could be a clerical mistake. Hey, we made a mistake with a prior document. I know that there was an issue with the heading, but just based upon reading it, yes, a lot of it is heavily redacted, and I think we'd all like to know what those redactions are. But B, it just concerns the communications that Flynn had with the Russian ambassador, and maybe even more importantly, did he see any sign of quid pro quo between Russia and the Trump campaign? A lot of the time he was questioned about that, the answers he gave were, I'm not sure, I don't quite remember that. Nothing that I read, and I did a very quick read of it, nothing from the surface of it did I see that was anything new, anything that we learned new. But it's interesting that it was filed so late, and we're getting our hands on it and seeing how it might influence the sentencing tomorrow. But at the end of the day, we knew that he had contact, that he lied about his contacts with the Russian ambassador, and it was about the involvement between these two entities. I'm just curious moving forward, will this help the special counsel's case or hurt it?
So in the intro, I think I misspoke there. I said that this was an interview with the special counsel. It actually was an interview with Peter Strzok.
That's right.
The then FBI agent. Now, remind us, is that significant at all here, or do we not know the answer to that at this particular moment?
I think it depends upon who you're asking.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the first time you read it, you said, oh, I recognize that name. Do we want to say that it's an area of bias? I read the questions, and it seemed to be the proper line of questioning for somebody who was in his position, asking the kinds of questions, whatever side of the aisle you're on, to ask Flynn these questions about his involvement with Russia, the Russian ambassador. There was nothing on the surface that seemed to be improper. So you could have taken Peter Strzok's name or put anybody's name there. It's just interesting because we know who Peter Strzok is and his whole story.
Right. Remind us, for people who aren't familiar, this is a name that came up and is something that we certainly heard a lot from Republicans about, and whether or not there was an anti-Trump bias associated with him. And
maybe rightfully so, because his communications text with Lisa Page showed a level of bias that is troublesome to see in a law enforcement organization such as this, and he had to answer those questions in front of a committee. And so when we see that name, I know that if anybody is looking at this and thinking in light of Flynn, because I know a lot of people who are looking at Flynn and thinking that he is the victim in this, and people who believe that might look at this memo and say, well, wait a second. Okay, clearly he is being pressured and asked the line of questioning from somebody who shows a clear bias. Then again, we can't forget the fact that Flynn pled guilty already.
Right.
We all know what happened. There's no changing that, and which I think you and I spoke about before. I was surprised to see Flynn do an about face and say that he was entrapped and that he was a victim here, when clearly the special counsel's office said he provided substantial assistance. We recommend no prison time. So why are you fighting this so much moving forward into the sentencing date?
So going back to this document, is there any sense about how this may or may not actually affect the sentencing on Tuesday of Michael Flynn?
I think it just helps the special counsel's office even further to show this level of communication, and there's certain facts that you just can't deny. I think the bigger picture here is that if he's sentenced to if he does not face prison time, the big aspect here when I look at this memo is the level of redactions. What other information does Flynn have That's the only thing I care about, because yes, we talked about it earlier. He must have provided information about those two business associates having improper lobbying efforts for those for the Turkish government. But there's more here that Flynn knows, and that's what I am interested in seeing, and I think that's what everybody's interested in seeing moving forward. So with his sentencing, we'll see what ultimately happens. He may receive prison time, may not, may be on probation. But moving forward in the next weeks and months, the level of information and substantial assistance he provided, that is going to be the next chapter, I think, in the Russia Mueller probe.
All right, we'll be watching closely. Jesse Weber. Jesse, thanks again for coming back to talk to us. Appreciate it.